As we came out from behind that mess back there in the backstage, Werner says, I thrive on negativity. So, I have to say, Werner has a book bag, which I'm very excited about. I was corrected backstage that there are over 80 films that he has made, and so imagine my surprise when last weekend he emails me and says, I don't want to talk about my films. Do you want to, also welcome, this is so fun.
Thank you very much.
Do you want to tell the audience why you forbade me from talking about your film?
No, I tried to get across that I'm a writer as much as I'm a filmmaker, sometimes to make it easy for anyone to understand. I have a formula. Filmmaking is like my voyage and writing is home. But I've been a writer, a poet from my first days on, parallel to what I did otherwise. And actually, first and foremost, I wanted to become an athlete, to fly on skis, to actually really fly. And I was always writing, and at the moment, the films I have made are more a distraction. And today is the release date of Every Man for Himself and God Against All, and I'm very proud that it exists. And all my last three books actually have to be attributed to my wife Lena, who is here. She saw, for example, that I have a diary with hundreds of pages in subminiaturized handwriting. I could decipher it only later with glasses that jewelers would use. So tiny. And I tried to decipher it and put it in clear text. And that was 5-6 years after I wrote it, and I couldn't face it. It was so terrifying.
Do you think you were hiding from yourself? Didn't the writing get smaller and smaller progressively?
Why, I do not know. It's because my long hand is of regular size, and today when I write and when you see if I sign one of the books, you will see my handwriting is of normal size. But there was something I do not know that was so on my shoulders, and I couldn't face it anymore. And 26 years later, Lena said to me, it exists. Some cretino, some crétin will put his or her hands on it, try to decipher it wrongly, get all the contexts wrong. You have to address it. So I looked into it 26 years later, and all of a sudden it was easy. I could face it, I could transcribe it, and the result of it is the book Conquest of the Useless.
Yes, I know. I want to talk about that book. I also want to say that in that same email, Werner also said, I should not be interviewed. So this is going to be very interesting, that in Conquests of the Useless, you say, these texts, this is in the preface, precisely about this tiny font that you wrote. These texts are not reports on the actual filming, in reference to Fitzcarraldo, of which little is said, nor are they journals, except in a very general sense. They might be described instead as inner landscapes born of the delirium of the jungle.
Yeah. Fever dreams in the jungle.
That's also in the book. Yes.
In a way,
And then you say, but even that might not be entirely accurate, and you conclude with, I'm not sure.
How can I? Because it's my own stuff, but I can be sure about certain things, and it has to do with science. I rejected the motto of this evening completely, but I'll go for your sake.
Let's change the slide.
I know. I will offer you some science, but Neolithic science, like moving a steamboat 340 ton and that is heavy. That is, nobody has ever moved a single object like this over a hill or a mountain. So, and it came to me during some years before when I ran into a whole field and hills of so-called menhirs in Brittany, in northeastern France. And Neolithic people had moved it across land or up a hill, and then these huge slabs of stone erected them perpendicularly. It's incredible to see that. And I read in a brochure that only alien astronauts could have done that. Neolithic man was incapable of doing that 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 years ago. And I said, no, this is nonsense. I cannot take such stupidity, and I will not leave the place until I figure out how with Stone Age technology I can do it, meaning ropes, levers, and a pulley system, and I developed some type of turnstiles that are moved around by many people, and they coil up a rope at its stem. So it's a transmission, it's a pulley system. And exactly in this way, I moved my ship over the hill in the jungle. Why do I have to invent something like that? And others maintain it can only have been done by aliens.
By aliens?
Yeah. And a similar thing, I mean, Dustin was here a moment ago. We met over a wonderful project he has. He wants to acquire, which is fairly easy, people want to get rid of. He wants to acquire a gigantic oil tanker, 300 meters long, meaning 1,000 feet long, 3 football fields long, and put it upright into the water like a sinking ship, the end of fossil fuels, in a way, a visual metaphor. And he engaged a whole bunch of engineers, I mean high caliber engineers, and these bozos come up with a solution, building the most gigantic cranes that have ever been conceived of. Nobody has even half the size of cranes, so it's almost prohibitive, too expensive. And by the way, this ship, when you take it out of the water and you put it in an incline, it will fracture, it will break like a can of soft drink, a soft aluminum. It will fracture it, the torque, everything will destroy it. And because of that, do we have a water bottle here? Maybe here.
I threw away my water bottle.
Bottles.
Somebody get this man a water bottle. Jesus.
No, what they came up with is complete, in a way, right. Yes, they put it almost perpendicularly, almost vertically, meaning that the point of gravity is still inside of the hull in order to maintain its stability. But if you have the ship, let's say, going down like the Titanic, the point of gravity ends up outside of the ship, and that will break it. And I came up, why do I have to come up with a solution? And I came up with a solution that a single person can do without engineers. So, yeah, you laugh because you don't know what I'm planning. You find it funny, but I'm not funny now. So, what I would do, of course, you would need engineers for underwater. Let's say the water is 100 meters deep. 300 feet deep. You have to put some sort of an anchoring at the ground which holds it in position, otherwise it's going to float around. And that, of course, we have expertise with bridges, pylons of bridges, or with, let's say, oil rigs in the ocean. So that needs engineers, and that's kind of expensive. But what I do now, one single person, you can do it as a single person. The ship is floating. You stabilize the hull by using some foam that is used by carpenters to seal gaps in wood. And you spray it as a foam. It's almost lightweight. and it solidifies, but it's still somehow flexible. So if I give you 50 years time, you alone will spray the entire hull with a layer. And of course, the 200 meters of the hull, you will fill bit by bit by bit by bit with millions of these spray cans of foam, which will make it solid. Then I give you another 50 or 100 years, and bucket by bucket by bucket, you will fill the stern with gravel and sand and heavy stuff, so it's going to sink down, and with ropes, you lead it into its anchoring, and now it's there. And you can do it as a single person if you have maybe 200 years' time. But of course, yeah, I'm asking myself, why do I, a filmmaker, writer,
I was going to ask you that. Don't rob me of my job.
Why does a poet have to come up with this?
That was exactly what I was going to ask you. But it reminds me of something. At one point, you were filming something about meteorites, and somebody was talking about stardust, and you break the fourth wall. You interrupt the interview, and you're behind camera, and I can kind of see your hand reach out, and you say, I need to interrupt, I need to interrupt. I don't think I'm stardust, you say about yourself. You say, I'm Bavarian.
Of course, yes, and I wear my Bavarian jacket tonight to show flag.
I do think that there is this sense in which your very unusual experience growing up made you know how to, or forced you to become expert in a variety of survival tactics that other people maybe were coddled out of. And I did want to turn this to your memoir, but it seems like you have a reaction to that.
Well, yes, I grew up, I was born while the war was still on, and in particular, post-war years.
In Munich?
No, not in Munich. I was bombed out when I was 2 weeks old. Okay. Everything was destroyed and in ruins, and the place where we lived was partially destroyed. And my mother found me in my cradle under a layer of a foot thick of glass shards and debris, but I was completely unhurt, and I was only 14 days old, and she got scared and fled with my older brother and me, so we were refugees into the remotest mountain valley you can imagine, and we grew up without running water. We had to go to the well with a bucket, and we had as a toilet only a outhouse, and snow drifts came in. And we had no sewage system, electricity. Sometimes, as a mattress, my mother would cut fern and dry it like hay. But the fern, of course, somehow condenses when you lie on it. And it has these stems when you cut it. They are sharp like a sharpened pencil, so they would sting you at night. And they form some sort of undulating surface. I never was flat. For 11 years, I never had a flat bed. I had to sleep somehow in these sort of things. And of course, we were starving. And we were very hungry.
You say literally, this is a quote, it was the most wonderful childhood.
It was, yes. And all the children who grew up in the bombed out cities say exactly the same. It's for children, or kings of bombed out blocks, and no fathers around, no drill marshals around, drill sergeants who would tell them how to behave. We re-educated our mother, and some of my strongest childhood memory, you pointed it out, is my mother. Yeah, maybe I can read that.
She had higher degrees, and your father
Well, she had
too.
a PhD, and my father as well, but...
they were intellectuals and scientists and
biology,
scientifically inclined
yes,
in
but
biology.
she was considered to be a medical doctor because she was Dr. Herzog. So the peasants believed she was a medical doctor, and in emergencies they would call for her.
But she was a PhD in biology.
Yeah.
So she was at a loss.
For example, a 4-year-old child reached up to a pot on the stove in the farmhouse and toppled it over, and boiling water went from his chin all the way over his body. And when my mother arrived, the boy was dead, or the heartbeat had stopped. And my mother, just solid as she was, put him an injection, I think adrenaline or whatever, between the ribs, right into the heart muscle, and the boy survived. So there was a sort of very special moment.
And bearing in mind that she had absolutely no medical training, but just rose to the title.
You had this passage where...
Yes, I would love for you... Oh, I have it, maybe.
You have it, I haven't marked it.
I have it on mine. I know where it is. So this really moved me, this passage, where you are talking about your mother. It's very early on in the book. Let's see. And I believe, it's the leftmost.
My brother Till, my older brother Till, and I grew up in extreme poverty, but we never even knew we were poor, except perhaps in the first 2 or 3 years after the end of the war. We were simply always hungry, and my mother was unable to produce enough food for us. We ate salad from dandelion leaves. My mother made syrups from ribwort and fresh pine shoots. The former was more of a house remedy for coughs and colds. The latter stood in for sugar. Once a week, there was a longish loaf of bread from the village baker, purchased with one of our ration coupons. With the point of a knife, our mother scratched a mark in it for each day, Monday to Sunday, allowing about a slice of bread for each of us. When hunger got to be very bad, we were each given a piece from the next day's ration, because my mother hoped something might turn up in the meantime, but generally the bread was finished by Friday, and Saturdays and Sundays were particularly bad. My deepest memory of my mother, burned into my brain, is the moment when my brother and I were clutching at her skirts, whimpering with hunger. With a sudden jolt, she freed herself, spun round, and she had a face full of anger and despair that I have never seen before or since. She said perfectly calmly, "Listen, boys, if I could cut it out of my ribs, I would cut it out of my ribs, but I can't, all right." At that moment, we learned not to wail. The so-called culture of complaint disgusts me. So it was...
It's a tremendous passage in so many ways, but this sort of resilience that your mother is teaching you almost unintentionally. It's just who she is.
We had to learn it ourselves. We re-educated our mother, who grew up in a regular household where she never had to starve. But we had to invent our toys. We had to invent our games. And there was, although the valley where I grew up, it was idyllic, but there was nothing like romanticism. And it's very strange because sometimes reviewer of films or of my books try to put me in some sort of a shelf or in some sort of order, and they keep saying, he's in the tradition of German romanticism. No, I am not. There's proof after proof after proof in my writing. For example, in Conquest of the Useless, description of nature, of the jungle, are really harsh and stark. Or for example, in Les Blanc's film Burden of Dreams, I deliver a speech about Mother Nature, which I can't take. It's all this new age crap that angers me if I just hear Mother Nature, makes me angry because it's this romanticizing of nature itself. I think you had a passage.
Well, yeah, there's two different things. I mean, there's so much here. One was from Burden of Dreams.
Yeah.
If I can just read back to you.
Let's go to Burden of Dreams, because I
and
have
then you're
another
going
good
to read
passage
from
here.
Conquest of,
Yes.
the Useless. So both of these are about, not about, but concurrent with Fitzcarraldo. And so I was given the instruction not to discuss Werner's films, but I'm going to discuss Les Blank's film, Burden of Dreams.
Can I, as an introduction
Yes,
to
please.
that,
Yeah.
I spoke that text on camera to Les Blank after our camp was attacked and burned down. We got into a civil war, into a border war between Peru and Ecuador. And we had 2 plane crashes. And we had an attack of a tribal group that lived far away up in the mountains. And since we had the driest dry season in recorded history, they traveled along the drying out river and attacked 3 people that were working and fishing for us. And they shot a man with a gigantic arrow, something like 6 feet long arrows and long razor sharp bamboo tips. They shot him through the throat and he survived. He was alive. And a woman was hit into the abdomen by 3 arrows. One broke inside the pelvis, one went through the body next to the kidneys, one was deflected from the hip. And we had to operate them on the kitchen table. They would have died if we had tried to transport them. So, and that's a moment when I'm asked 2 days later, Les asked me, speak about nature here.
Yeah.
So please read it.
It was very much my impression that there were these sort of 2 parallel things going on. One is you're trying to make this film, but you're also actually living the film. You are living it. It's not CGI. It's not a little model. You are actually making engineering solutions, which you are daily working on.
It's all my life. The books as well. My memoirs is my life.
Yeah.
That's why it's easy to write, because I have
lived it.
carried my life long enough.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is, I think, a beautiful response that you give, just raw in front of camera. To me, you seem stripped of, you're just totally vulnerable and speaking completely naturally. And you start to speak about the work in a way that I think represents what we're discussing tonight, that you see yourself as a writer and you have been writing this incredible prose all along. We'll talk about scenarios and how you actually write the films. But you say this in this devastating moment after all of this insanity in the Amazon, when the film is called Burden of Dreams, when the whole thing could absolutely collapse. Yeah. And you say, no, please, I don't want to.
No, Les stole the title from me. I'll read it here in my
okay.
text. But don't you have the speech on the jungle?
Can't trust rock and roll, guys. So you say here, every day life is only illusion, an illusion behind which is the reality of dreams. It's not just my dreams. It's my belief that all these dreams are yours as well. The only distinction between me and you is I can articulate them. I make films because I have not learned anything else. It's my duty. This might be the inner chronicle of what we are, and we have to articulate that. Otherwise, we are just cows in the field.
But it's not my speech on the jungle. Do you have that? Which is really, really wild.
I don't think I do. I don't think I do have the speech of In the Jungle from Burden of Dreams.
No, let's forget it if you don't
okay,
have it.
Okay, but can you paraphrase it for us?
No, I speak about how debased and depraved and vile and hostile and obscene
you do
nature
say,
is.
I do have that you say, it is not, you say about nature, it is not harmony but chaos, hostility and murder.
Yes, that's what the universe tells you when you don't need to be a scientist like you into astronomy and cosmology. You just need to look up and you see the mess, and you see that it's very dangerous and very hostile out there. You don't need to have any schooling at all. You know it.
Yeah.
You can tell.
And I think that this is a beautiful segue to this passage in Conquest of the Useless, which was essentially your diary during that time. You have a later passage where you address these feelings again.
It has to do with nature, and it has to do a little bit with...
do you want to do that?
It has to do with, how can I say, the anti-romantic view of nature and of the environment. And I can do it, thank you, yeah. It's the end of this year. I was back where I was filming and made a film on Kinski and our collaboration and me. And I met some people, some men who long before had promised or had offered to kill Kinski for me, which I had declined. I still needed him for work. So, and I'm at this village. It was midday, Shivankurini, a small town, a small village in the jungle. It was midday and very still. I looked around because everything was so motionless. I recognized the jungle as something familiar, something I had inside me, and I knew that I loved it, yet against my better judgment. Then words came back to me that had been circling, swirling inside me through all these years. That happens sometimes, that like a melody that you cannot get out of your head for month after month. They're swirling for a decade or 2 decades, words in me, and all of a sudden I break out of it. So then words came back to me that had been circling, swirling inside of me all those years. Hearken, heifer, hoarfrost, denizens of the crag, will-o'-the-wisp, hogwash, uncouth, flotsam, fiend. Only now did it seem as though I could escape from the vortex of words. Something struck me, a change that actually was no change at all. I had simply not noticed it when I was working here. There had been an odd tension hovering over the huts, a brooding hostility. The native families hardly had any contact with each other, as if a feud reigned among them. But I had always overlooked that somehow, or denied it. Only the children had played together. Now, as I made my way past the huts and asked for directions, it was hardly possible to get one family to acknowledge another. The seething hatred was undeniable, as if something like a climate of vengeance prevailed from hut to hut, from family to family, from clan to clan. I looked around, and there was the jungle manifesting the same seething hatred, wrathful and steaming, while the river flowed by in majestic indifference and scornful condescension, ignoring everything, the plight of man, the burden of dreams, and the torment of time. So, and burden. So, and what I'm trying to say is, yes, I'm a poet, I know that, and it comes from real life and the real experience, and the worldview is shaped, and my prose, my poetry is shaped accordingly, and tonight, filmmaking is only a distraction. I'm a writer who happens to make as well some films.
Do you mind if I swap you out? Sorry about our crude, we're working our way through this. So I was so moved by this idea that you were living this experience. It's really what you just said, that you're not approaching this as a distant observer or trying to summarize things theoretically or hypothetically through books, but you're actually going right in and experiencing it. And so much of your memoir is a broken nose and a busted lip, and you're about to fall into a ravine, and then something catches fire. And it's almost as though you're hurtling yourself into this, the most extremes of experience. You go to Antarctica, you go to the precipice of a volcano, you go an active volcano, you go to the furthest reaches of the earth.
It kind of sounds sexy. I'm going to Antarctica. You know what? Antarctica, when you're at McMurdo Station, there's an ATM machine. It's not like in Shackleton's time. There's an ATM machine, and there are abominations like aerobic studios and yoga classes. So and of course I have done risky things, and I have been in, I think the title. The title
Let's talk
is
about
actually,
the title.
The photo is not long ago. I was on a volcano in Vanuatu, Western Pacific, and with a very competent volcanologist, and we put on these fireproof suits, and we went very, very close because it was regular eruptions or lava flying out into the air. And it looked all right, but they are unpredictable, and all of a sudden we were too close. And a massive sort of ejection of glowing slabs came out and raining on us. So you better flee. You flee because I'm a professional, and as a professional I flee. And I do not no, it would be ridiculous. I do not expose myself to these things. It was good for the images, and it was good for the texts that I wrote. But of course, sometimes certain risks, yes.
I remember you said there's a part where you're instructed to face the lobbing lava, the volcanic eruptions, and watch it so you can dodge it. And that's kind of your instruction. You don't huddle or hide. Or
yeah, when you duck down, you don't see what's raining on you. You better look up and step to the side.
This whole discussion also of language, I find, sorry. Is there, okay, yeah, apologies. This whole discussion of language, though, I think is very interesting. This book, did you originally write it in German or in English?
Always in German, my own language.
Always.
Yes, I have to.
You say your own language, but isn't this also your own language? English?
No, it's my second or my
your
fifth
third,
or sixth language. No, because
Do you consider Bavarian different
first
from
language,
German?
it's so different. I had to learn proper German, and then, of course, in school, Latin, ancient Greek. You do not speak it because they are not spoken anymore. You read it. Then at the end, a little bit English, then Spanish and some other stuff. But it's good that as a poet that you understand the depth of language of others, and understand that we are losing incredible values of languages that we are losing every day. Every 10 or 12 days we are losing a language of the 7,000 or so still existing ones. And it's a catastrophic event, faster than any extinction of whales, snow leopards or panda bears. So, and we do not see it easily and clearly enough. So I have always been very, very much into languages, and my wife Lena has been very much into it, doing an oratorio called Last Whispers of extinct languages that are only existing in tape recordings, and critically endangered languages where 2 or 3 language speakers of the language left, and composed into an oratorio, and with a visual component as a virtual reality piece, which was shown in Venice at the Biennale. So I've learned a lot from her, and in many ways. Conquest of the Useless, she kicked me in addressing my own diaries. I wrote, she said to me, you're doing nothing at the moment, and she has been with me meeting Onoda, Hiro Onoda, the soldier who...
Oh yeah, in the Twilight World.
Who 29 years after the end of the war still believed that the war was on, misreading or reading the signs correctly, but not knowing the larger context. So, I wrote this and I finished quickly, and she said, yeah, well, you're looking out the window. Why don't you continue writing? So I wrote the memoir. Some cretino will do it. You better do it yourself. So.
I would love to talk about your process, because you are obviously insanely prolific. You just can't seem to... You said something about the furies of work chasing you, or maybe you're chasing the furies, but your process is you write very quickly. You said you can write under any circumstances. It could be a bus in the midst of traffic with noise around, and you have no problem.
My drunken soccer team.
A drunken soccer
team. Vomiting over
team.
my typewriter, and I wrote... Agere, the Wrath of God, in 2.5 days, a screenplay, because I see an entire film.
I was going to ask,
Here in the
what takes
memoirs,
hold?
I see my entire life, which is easy, because I lived it.
So it's as though the typing is catching up with the fully formed vision that you already have of it.
In a way, yes, so it's... I have lived it, I don't need to invent it.
But you didn't live Aguirre Wrath of God, and... This was a very early, I mean, you didn't live that experience, but you were able to write it as though it was fully formed in 2 days in mayhem and madness.
Yes, I don't need a quiet place in the countryside or so. I don't care where I'm writing. And I'm not a workaholic, and my shooting days are normally over by 3:30 or 4, and the team is always nervous you didn't shoot coverage. I didn't even know what coverage meant. So it's an idiotic concept to shoot from all angles and close up and circling around. You never need it for the screen. I know my story because I see it. So in the same thing here, I do not correct much. However, in my memoirs, every single stone was turned around and checked. My 2 siblings, my 2 brothers, had the manuscript, and they looked into all the childhood things. All the other events in my life had so many witnesses, so you can't make it up. A whole crew, actors were around. You cannot make things up when there are so many witnesses. It sounds odd when I'm saying, yes, I was shot while I was doing an interview. It was with the BBC, and it's on tape.
You were shot?
I was shot, yeah, but it was insignificant. It wasn't that bad, and I wanted to continue at least my sentence.
With the interview?
Yeah, sure.
Your sentence, your actual sentence?
And later on at home and behind safe walls, I continued the whole thing, although I was bleeding a little bit. So, or for example, I took Joaquin Phoenix out of a turned-over car. He had an accident, ran up almost vertical embankments, flew somehow, turned around in midair and landed on the roof. And he was deployed between airbags, upside down. And I recognized him somehow, and he was desperately
trying. This is like on the LA freeway?
Pardon?
This is like the Los Angeles freeway?
No, it was in the hills. Not the freeway, it was deep down. Hills are not, the freeways are not, still Los Angeles, yeah. And he was desperately trying to light a cigarette upside down as he was between. And I said to him, man, relax. And he said, upside down, he said to me, I am relaxed. And I said to him, man, you are not. And I had to distract him and snatch the cigarette lighter from him because he was unaware that gasoline was dripping all into his car. So I never spoke about it. never spoke about it until months later. Joaquin Phoenix spoke about it to the media. Only then I started to talk about it. So there were witnesses. There were people who could confirm it. It's on tape. It's in Les Blanc's film and so on, and in writing.
You're very scrupulous in this way. I remember you have a description in the memoir of being in North Korea, and you you intentionally film some soldiers kind of mocking around. And they become very angry. They almost confiscate your entire drive, your entire film.
Right.
And somehow you convince them
Even
that your word is salt, that you will not ever release this footage, and in fact you don't.
Correct, yes. They confiscated the entire hard drive of a whole week of shooting because I had filmed something I was not supposed to do. Soldiers who took selfies, a few females, and some of the young men tickled one of them under the armpit, and she laughed, and I found it wonderful and filmed it. So I was immediately stopped, my material confiscated, and the data management was so complicated that we couldn't delete it, and the North Koreans couldn't not delete it either. So I said to the North Korean Secret Service, I said to them, give it back to me. I can guarantee to you that I will never use it. And they said, guarantee, ha ha ha, yes, we'll write a 65-page contract. And the moment you are leaving our airspace, you rip it in pieces and you publish it. And I said, no, I'm not one of those. I can give you even 3 guarantees. And they said, 3 guarantees, what do you mean? And I said, my face, my honor, and my handshake. And they shook my hand and gave me the hard drive back. And I will never ever publish this footage. Even if you pay me $10 million, I will not give it to you.
I believe
and
your
they noticed.
Yes.
They noticed. Even the North Korean Secret Service. But you have to, how shall I say? You have to earn this trust. You have to exude it. There's something. I'm functioning in a different way. And they understood it.
In your, it's also sort of a diary, but kind of a field journal, walking in ice.
Of walking in ice.
Of walking in ice. This is a very wonderful book. I think it describes something about you that is so enigmatic that people want to understand but can't quite grab a hold of. You hear a story that the German-French film critic, writer Lotte Eisner is dying, and I don't. I'm sorry, you guys. Like we have like the aliens are speaking to us about erecting the meteorites. And you decide that she's not going to die if you just walk there. You just decide this. You have this conviction. If you decide to walk from Munich to Paris, she will stay alive until you get there.
Yes,
you begin to write this.
Yeah.
You knew that.
Sure, of course.
Did she stay alive? Sure, of course.
She stayed alive. She was something like 80. We never knew exactly how old she was, because she celebrated her 75th birthday at least twice, maybe 3 times. So, but when she was out of hospital, and somehow language came apart when I arrived. I walked 85 kilometers in the winter storms against me, a day, a whole night, and another day. And I arrived, and in a way, language comes apart. And I can read you a little passage from when I had arrived.
I just, right before you do that, let me just set this up by saying that in the preface, you write that the desire to show this to others unknown to me outweighs the dread, the timidity to open the door so wide to unfamiliar eyes. I think that that's a disposition that people would be surprised to hear you ever have, timidity about exposing your thoughts, words, films, ideas
I'm kind of
to
shy
unfamiliar
because
eyes.
the diary, I was sitting on it for 4 or 5 years thought it should never be published, but I was encouraged to publish it. And Lotte summoned me 8 years later, and she said, "Come quickly, listen, come quickly." And I arrived, she says, "I'm almost blind. The joy of my life to read and see movies I cannot do anymore. I can barely walk, only on crutches. I'm saturated of life," very biblical. And when I arrived, it's very strange because language somehow disintegrates. Saturday, 14th December, as afterthought, just this. I went to Madame Eisner. She was still tired and marked by her illness. Someone must have told her on the phone that I had come on foot. I didn't want to mention it. I was embarrassed and placed my smarting legs up on a second armchair, which she pushed over to me. And now it comes very strange. In the embarrassment, a thought passed through my head. And since the situation was strange anyway, I told it to her. Together, I said, "We shall boil fire and stop fish." You see, you boil a soup or water, but you don't boil fire, and you stop the traffic, but you don't stop fish. So I said, "We shall boil fire and stop fish." Then she looked at me and smiled very delicately, and since she knew I was alone on foot and therefore unprotected, she understood me. For one splendid fleeting moment, something mellow flowed through my deadly tired body. I said to her, "Open the window. From these last days onward, I can fly." So
Beautiful.
And
Werner, didn't she consider it somewhat of a hex that you forbade her to die until you arrived walking from Munich to Paris?
I don't know. It was clearly I wouldn't allow her.
I believe I remember in the memoir that she asked you to release her and let her die.
Yeah. Well,
Do you have a passage you want to read? I wanted to ask you also about this idea that Josh introduced in his introduction, which is this idea of an ecstatic truth. I think there really is something talking to you, knowing you a little bit, that is genuinely unflinching. It is that look in your eye that you gave to the North Korean authorities that made them trust you. It is also that look in your eye, we were talking about this earlier, which made you so terrifying in Jack Reacher.
Yes, I'm good as a villain.
Yes, you're a good baddie. And, but you really are genuinely an unflinching person. You don't look away. And I wonder if you sense that about yourself, if you're aware of how charged that can be around you. You don't make social graces, you don't let people off the hook with little laughter and niceties. You are always speaking your mind. And I don't know if that's tied to the idea of ecstatic truth or if it's not.
It is simply departing from the pure factual side of things in a story. If you stylize a story, or you cast a story well, or if you repeat a scene, which I do in documentaries, for example, it means I'm after something which looks into a deeper stratum of something that might be truth, which we cannot define, nobody can define it, but something that illuminates us. And the most simple of all examples, the Pietà, the sculpture of Michelangelo. He has Jesus in the lap of his mother Mary, and Jesus' face is the tormented face of a 33-year-old man, and the face of his mother is a 15-year-old girl, the mother of the 33-year-old man. So my question is, did Michelangelo try to give us fake news or lie to us? Now he illuminates us, he gives us the essence. So that's basically what I do. And if I do it, I declare myself. And I invent wildly, and I do things that normally people do not do in writing or in or in filmmaking.
Why do you think that they don't do those things? Do you think people are relying too much on structure or preconceived?
No, there are conventions, and
There are
there's
conventions.
stereotypes in storytelling that wouldn't allow
And
that.
you never have the urge to fall into that. You talk about your rogue film school.
I do fall into it. When I did, for example, a vampire film, Nosferatu, I did a film, Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans. It is within a genre even, and so what? It doesn't really matter. But it's a very, very own way to see things and describe things and put things into writing or into a film. And I really like language itself, a vortex of word or a vortex of images. Like, for example, in the memoirs, I may read something at the end.
Yes.
It's very funny because the text, the book, stops in the middle of a sentence. And I didn't want that readers would angrily return the book to the publisher and say, well, there's something missing. It stops. Is this a misprint or so? So I explained it. The
Right in the introduction.
Soldier Onoda said to me, sometimes you can see the future for a moment. A bullet fired at him and he survived 111 ambushes. Once a bullet was fired at him, sun was low, and he sees a bullet coming at him glowing. For a split of a second, he sees the future. And he sees it glowing like in copper-colored, glowing light. And he only has time to rotate his body, and it whizzes by. And I was in the last chapter, and I see a bullet coming at me. I look up, and it was copper and greenish iridescent, and it was a hummingbird. And right there I stopped, and I thought, I don't continue now. And I'd like to read you this, because somehow images and stories are starting to come apart. The end of images. I knew it was going to be the last chapter, and I describe the end of human beings in 200,000 years. There will not be any human beings around, but monuments that we left. For example, a dam in the gorge of Vajont, 180 meters tall, and at its base 29 meters wide, specially hardened steel and cement. In 200,000 years, much of it will be still standing, because the entire dam withstood the onslaught of 65 million cubic meters of rock and earth that went into the lake, into the lake of the dam, and it actually tossed the water 750, 800 meters high up in the air. It is destroyed a village 800 feet higher up and went down in the valley. So we had a tsunami that was 750 feet tall, only in the 60s.
So just before you read this passage,
Yeah.
you also discuss the salt mines where they're trying to bury nuclear waste, and how
Yes.
beyond language, how will we signal that
How do they read
that this
science?
is yes, that this is don't dig here, this is radioactive or beyond symbols and languages that we understand, and there are also examples of things like that with tsunamis.
We can do it easily for our generation and the few next ones, but if we go ahead in time, let's say as far back like the Paleolithic cave where I filmed 32,000-year-old signs and images and animals and strange signs in there. How
Cave
did
of
they
Forgotten
see it?
Dreams.
Cave of Forgotten Dreams. And deciphering, understanding signs, reading the signs, because in 30,000 years from now, nobody will speak English anymore. We can't even understand Beowulf English, 9th century anymore. And that was only 1,200 years back in time. And signs cannot be read by everyone. I did some filming with African villages in far out Uganda, preventive medicine with posters. And the villagers looked at the posters that were there for instruction, and afterwards they thought a big eye for cleaning the eyes and hygiene of the eyes. A woman said to me, "Oh, that's a rising sun." And somebody said to me, "It's a big fish." So I turned 4 posters. I turned one upside down. There was a village and people and cattle, and it was upside down. And I explained one of these images. I turn on the head. People are with their feet up in the sky and the head down. Which one is the upside down poster? 2/3 could not identify it. For them, they were not accustomed to read our kind of imagery. They would see it like abstract dots of color, like we see, for example, early paintings of clay, early abstract paintings. And we cannot read what is the message in these images. And 30,000 years from now, how do you create signs that can be read by people whom we do not know, and he will certainly misread most of it.
I just want to let people know that we do have a Q&A mic, and I want to close our conversation before the Q&A with this reading.
Yeah.
But before I do that,
yeah.
I want to ask you about what you just said, because here you are with 80 plus films, 12 books. You've already have another film in the making, even though they are a distraction.
And I finished another book
You
in
finished
June,
another book in German, which may be translated in
The Future of Truth.
The Future of Truth, and then you have a film about the brain and AI. And in the context of what you just said, the insight and the foresight that so much of how we communicate now, all of these ways, opera, acting, literature, experience, journals, films, that you've tried to communicate to the world or just reflect something, as you said. Otherwise, we are just cows in the field. And that what you have is the ability to articulate it. How do you look into that future, thinking how lasting can any expression really be? And well, is that daunting for you?
Yes and no, but what can I say? It doesn't make me nervous that we will have to face a world where the human race is extinct, like dinosaurs. Doesn't make me really nervous, because it's so clear it will happen. And our species, biologically speaking, is very vulnerable, and we have it in us to be self-destructive. So collectively, so it will happen. How fast, nobody knows, but probably faster than we think. But whatever, I'm not a pessimist. It simply doesn't make me nervous. And what I'm doing is, whatever is being thrown at me, you can be sure I'm gonna deal with it. You throw anything at me, I will deal with it. I will deal with it like a soldier. With a sense of duty, with courage, with loyalty, with all good qualities of a real soldier of writing and of filmmaking. So don't worry about that.
And with that, you're going to read another passage from Every man for himself, and God against all. And yes, we had a whole conversation about the title, which we'll have to do another time. Every man for himself and God against all.
Yeah, I foresee an end of images. How could one depict the absence of images? Not just their removal, the final irrevocable turning away from images, but their non-existence. I imagine 2 mirrors set up in exact opposition, reflecting nothing but each other into infinity, but with nothing for them to mirror. If the mirrors were one-way mirrors, like the kind that detectives use for interrogations, then you would see a void reflected in the mirror opposite. No criminal confessing, no table, no chair, no lamp, just space containing nothing that is reflected over and over again. Nothing else. No living, no breathing. No Frenchman eating his bicycle. No second Frenchman switching into reverse and driving his ancient car backward through the Sahara Desert. No truth, no lie. No river called the River of Lies, Yuyapichis, the deceiving river that pretends to be the much larger Pitches River. No Japanese marriage agency ordering a bucketful of sand to be emptied out of a satellite to so the bride can be astonished by a shower of meteorites. No more twins living in separate bodies, but thinking and speaking in unison. No parrots from Alexander von Humboldt's 1802 journey up the Orinoco, where he came to a village, all of whose inhabitants had been killed off by a plague. Their language had died with them, but the neighboring village had for the past 40 years continued to look after their parrot. This parrot could speak 60 distinct words of the inhabitants of the dead village, their dead language. Humboldt copied them down in his notebook. What if we taught those words to two parrots and the two could converse in them? What if we project ourselves far into the future and imagine things that we have created that still exist, not forever, but for 200,000 years, let's say, a time when humanity will almost certainly have died out, but certain of our monuments might still exist, indestructible. The dam in the Voyant Gorge that withstood a vast landslide of 250 million cubic meters of rocks and earth and gravel. At its foot, this dam is 28 meters thick and poured from specially hardened concrete. This lower part would still almost certainly be there, standing majestically without relaying any message, no message for anyone. There at the foot of the smooth concrete wall, there would be a crystal clear trickle of water from the rocks to the side. It would be sought out by herds of deer as though. End of the book.
I would love to open it to, do we have a line at the microphone? Please be bold, ask questions. We only have about 10 minutes for questions, but there will be a book signing after. Werner will be at the store front desk. By the way, at the book signing, please don't ask for personalized inscriptions. There are just too many books, and he will be happy to meet you and sign. A question, please.
I just wanted to say we're going to start the line here, so if you can make space.
Where are you? On the side or where?
I think on the side to the right.
Here.
Yes.
So the line is going to be right here.
Yes. Okay, great.
You want to go ahead and ask a question?
Oh, it's me. Hi. I have a quite universal question, which is, how do you feel that success as a filmmaker has affected your work? Your work becoming more known, has it affected your choices, your style? Yeah.
I've never had a major success. Compared to Hollywood films, it is so minor, like the black under my nail. So I've never really been successful with my movies. So and sometimes there was some quasi successes coming 10 years too late, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect me. I do not relate to success.
Yet you understand that you have this enormous influence, impact, and a huge base of not just fans, but devotees. How do you reconcile that with never having had in what you describe as a commercial success? Why do you think that is?
People were simply not interested in my films. Gary, The Wrath of God, it took about 5-6 years until it was shown in France. In Germany, it was released, and I was invited to it had very bad reviews, by the way. I was invited to come to the theater in Frankfurt because this one particular newspaper wrote well, and I'm taken out to the stage, and there are seven people out there. So, I faced it. I had to face it, and it took 10 years until the film became successful, quasi-successful. It has never made me rich or so, and I've always invested. Whenever there was money, I have always invested it into my own films. So, in success, I had no career in filmmaking. Has been more stable in writing. Of Walking in Ice, which I published in the 70s, has never gone out of print, and it has had one edition after the other. And it has become a bestseller in Argentina and in Chile and in some countries. So it's very odd. I do not relate to success.
Thank you very much.
Hi, you were always talking about desire flying to space. And here you are. You were starring in Mandalorian. What can you tell us about your experience being in Mandalorian, flying this big spaceship?
Mandalorian and Werner did mention earlier about trying to fly to space.
Yeah, okay. It's a performance. I'm an actor, and I work for money. And I do it well. But of course, I would love to be out in space. They always take engineers and mission specialists along. They've never taken a poet along. And I have tried to apply for NASA for one of the shuttle missions, was never invited. And recently a Japanese billionaire has started to plan to invite 8 people with him to go around the moon, circling around it and then returning to Earth in about 8 or 10 days. And put out the applications, and I applied for it actually seriously against the very, very serious objections of my wife, who didn't like it at all. But I applied, and I was not invited. I was not accepted. So it's too sad. I find it wrong. Find me the Japanese billionaire who invites me with my camera.
Thank you. Thanks.
So, about 8 years ago, I read a conversation that you had with Paul Cronin, where you talked about your experience of LA, and you said a few provocative things that I would hope you could expound on. One, you said, New York is more concerned with finance than anything else. It doesn't create culture, it only consumes it. Most of what you find in New York comes from elsewhere. You also said, when you were talking about LA, you said something about how everything is in LA. The only thing, you said, a fascinating density of things exists there like nowhere else in the world. Muslim fundamentalism is probably the only contemporary mass movement that wasn't born there. Correct. And then you said, but ranting about cultural decay isn't very useful. The poet must not avert his eyes. So I was wondering if you could talk about Muslim fundamentalism given the context of what's happening now.
No, I won't.
I don't blame him. That's not the right context for that.
It's a different conversation. And I made this remark, fundamentalism, Muslim fundamentalism as a movement that has relevance in the world. And Los Angeles has relevance as a place where things really happen, where the big trends of our times are being born. For example, the internet was born in Los Angeles. Reusable rockets are built within the perimeter of the city in the southern part. And on and on and on. Also the idiocies, crazy sects inline skating, yoga classes for 5-year-olds. And I said, one of the few exceptions that was not born in Los Angeles, for example, is Muslim fundamentalism, and that was born in Egypt, Yemen, Pakistan. But today's situation, I'm against war. It's terrible. It's terrible that it's happening, and you have to look at the historical origins. I think Ben Gurion in 1919, more than 100 years ago, says this conflict is irreconcilable because there are two populations there that have an equal right to the same holy sites and to the same land. 1919 Ben Gurion, and we still have it. It's terrible, terrible, and I wish I could do something about it, but I can't.
So even in response to that question, quite unflinching, I'm also reminded that you wrote a lot about child soldiers in Peru, and you are able to assume a distance in some of these observations where you're not taking a political stance, or your film about Kuwait and the burning oil fires, it almost becomes so abstract. Where that film's almost science fiction. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. It's an alien landscape.
Our planet anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you're not making a commentary, but yet you're allowing other people to come to a conclusion. And
by the way, some of the most beautiful and harshest prose you will find in my memoirs. All of a sudden, I intersperse 5 ballads of the little soldier, 1 to 5. And ballad number 5 is something, if you read that, you will never forget it in your life. You will never, ever forget it. And it's very, very stark, naked prose. And that's the power probably of why I interspersed it. Because the text, the prose is so strong. Okay, yes.
Please, I think we only have time. I'm so sorry for maybe 2 more questions, and then we'll bring Werner to the desk for book signing.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, Werner. You said earlier that you believe that the endangerment of language is more dangerous than the endangerment of animals like panda bears. But what else do you think is dangerously endangered right now?
No, I'm not speaking dangerous. It is progressing faster than the disappearance of endangered mammals, for example. It goes faster. And we have evidence that it's going much faster than any other extinction of any animals. And it's catastrophic. And I think that's one of the things I try to tell to the green movement. You are speaking of the well-being of the panda bear, and you are speaking of the well-being of some rare salad leaves. Who of you is ever speaking about the extinction of human cultures and languages? None, not one. And I mind that.
And what else do you think is rapidly being endangered? Yeah.
We as a species.
Thank you.
Last question, thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. I actually was watching Burden of Dreams last night, and I had a thought about what did you learn, if anything, about being subject while also being maker? And did you apply any of that new storytelling knowledge to any of your work?
I learned nothing about myself. by being in a film by Les Blank, I was just doing my work, and he kept the camera rolling. So you don't learn anything. And I don't like to look too much at myself anyway. All right, that's...
On that wonderful note,
thank you very much.
Please join me in thanking Werner Herzog again.